Okay, so today we are going to still be dealing with quadratic equations. We are going to solve them using a formula. So not every quadratic equation can be factored. You will get the formula, so that's good. And it's called the quadratic formula. So that's also good. It makes sense with what we've been dealing with. And the quadratic formula is incredibly useful. I teach senior chemistry. We use the quadratic formula. So it has applications in science. If you're into physics, you'll use it there. So lots of applications. So again, just for review, if you're going to solve it, you're looking for the roots or the solutions or the zeros. We called them all three things. So when you're solving an equation, it's when it's equal to 0. So last Thursday the Thursday before, we did solving equations using factoring. Now there are some equations that are not factorable. So how do we solve them? Using what's called the quadratic formula. And you'll be given the formula, whether it's on the quiz or on the exam. So the big thing with this is making sure that your equation is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So you could have to rearrange. And deciding and making sure that you know which is A, which is B, and which is C. And it goes in alphabetical order. We've been using standard form over and over and over again. So the first letter here is A, the second letter with just the X term is B, and the last letter is C. So a few weird things about this, and it really has to do with your calculator. So I recommend you use the same calculator. You don't let anybody else touch it. You sleep with it under your pillow, take it out for dinner. If your sibling comes and says, "Can I borrow your calculator?" You say no. Miss Todd says no. You really need to get to know your calculator because there's a squared term under here. So again, if your calculator is such that it does things like this, you're going to get a negative under the square root, you're going to get errors, and it's very, very frustrating, okay? So make sure you're wary of that. Also here, the formula is negative b. So that means if you have a b that is okay, so the b value is -3. If you put negative, what happens here? What does this change to? Positive, okay? So you have to be careful of that as well. So just like we've been doing with a parabola has symmetry, which means there are often two solutions. We'll look at in the second lesson how to tell whether there's one solution, two solutions, or no solutions. And so that's why there's this plus minus here. So again, when you do square rooting, there's a positive answer and a negative answer. So we'll show our work and then sort of at the end kind of split it into the positive side and the negative side. Eventually, when you do this in grade 11 and grade 12 or in chemistry, you can choose to show less of the work. There are actually calculators that will do this for you. So it's like I said, you're going to use it over and over and over again, okay? So, but for you guys in grade 10, you're going to be given this quadratic formula. Okay, so use the quadratic formula to solve each equation. So this time, these are equations that are not factorable. So what that means is we're going to get answers sometimes, it doesn't have to, but sometimes that are decimals. So usually it'll tell you to round to 3 decimal places. So that's, that's like math form part of it. When we get to the last unit, which is trig, and we're doing like angles, usually it'll say round to the nearest degree or something like that. So these answers can definitely be decimals, okay? So when we do the examples, we're going to fill in what A is and what B is and what C is. If you find that helpful, then you should do that when you do these questions. Often students are like, I don't need to do the homework on this. This seems easy. I'm going to get the formula. I know what to do. And then they don't, okay? So this is the first time you've ever had to use the quadratic formula. So do as much practice as you can. So then, even though tomorrow's quiz is only at a 21, which is not very big, then that's an opportunity for you to get a good mark, because the chapter 4 test could have been, maybe, is a little bit trickier, okay? So let's fill in what A is and what B is and what C is. So we have 2, 15, and 1. The question will tell you, so I mean, tomorrow it's just quadratic formula, but let's say it was grouped together. It would have said, solve using the quadratic formula, okay? So you would have known that. How do I know that I'm solving? Again, it's got equal to 0. That means solving, yes? I forget if I put the quadratic, I think I just put it at the top of the test or the quiz, but here it is here, okay? When you do the exam, it'll be on the front page. So you're going to be given this formula, but you have to decide what A and B and C are, and you have to not make math errors with your calculator. And it's very, very annoying. Even for my chemistry students, they'll say, Ms. Todd, I got a negative under the square root sign. I can't get an X value. And like I said, get a calculator that you love. Don't let anybody else touch it. Sleep with it under your pillow so that you know how to use that calculator. So this time our B is positive, so we can just plug it into the negative B part. Okay, so I'm going to simplify things a little bit before I split into the positive and the negative root. I'll write that down first. So 15 squared is 225. 4 times 2 times 1 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4. Philip, turn it down. So now this is where we're going to split. So again, we've got a parabola, so we want 2 answers. Yes? Okay, that's why we're going to get 2. It doesn't matter which is which. Most people do plus first because it's written first here. It doesn't matter. When you get down here, maybe this is where you would feel comfortable putting this right into your calculator. That's fine. However, I do recommend you do, if you're going to type this in all at the same time, do negative 15 plus square root 217, then push equals, and then divide by 4. Okay? Some calculators will, if you don't put the equal sign in, or you could put this in brackets. Sometimes it will do funky things with BEDMAS. Okay, so you can also show all your work, which is what I'll do. So the square root of 217 is an irrational number. So because it says to do 3 decimal places, I'm gonna keep 4 for now. Okay. So the square root of 217. Okay, so I'm gonna keep 4 decimal places just for now. Then divide by 4. Now in my answer, you should only have 3 because that's what the question says. Okay? So negative, and negatives are fine, positives are fine. When you use the quadratic formula, most of the time you're going to get decimals. Okay? 3 decimal places. Not always. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. You could get 2 positives, 2 negatives. It just depends where the parabola is going. So this parabola would be like this. Like this is the y-axis and this is the x. It's been shifted, which is what we're going to do tomorrow. Okay? So now this one is similar, except this time the b value is negative, so I chose that on purpose. So the a value is now 1, b is negative 6, and c is positive 4. So when you go to plug it in, you're going to get that negative b that you need to be careful of. So out here you need to be careful, and also when you plug it in under here. Yes, Ty? Yes. You can also, the last time I square rooted after we split it, so this time you could even do, like you can square root it here. Again, because we're going to, the question asks for 3 decimal places in the answer, I'm going to keep one more here under the square root. Okay, so now I'm ready to split apart. Oops, this is not square root, sorry. And then this question, can we solve this right away? No, it needs to be in ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 first. So you can decide how many steps you need to show, okay? So the fact that it says squared, I would rewrite it like this. So now the left side we have to FOIL and the right side we can just distribute. So first x times x is x squared. Outside x times 4 is 4x. Inside 4 times x. And then last 4 times 4. Okay, and then 2 times x and 2 times 5, which is 2x plus 10. And now we want it all to be 0, so equal to 0. So you can decide if you want to collect these like terms first before you bring the number, the 2x term and the 10 over. It's really up to you, okay? Some people will just put them all together first and then collect the like terms. It doesn't really matter. But it has to be equal to 0. Whether you're solving by factoring or solving by the quadratic formula, has to be equal to 0. So there's nothing to go with the x squared, so that's the only term there. 4 plus 4 is 8, minus 2 is 6x. 16 minus 10 is 6. It doesn't really matter, but what I did was when I brought this over, it has to be negative. Are you good with that? So then I just put it with the other x's. Yes. So you could have done this. Like you could, even done this, just brought them over. I just put them together. It doesn't matter. You could have shown less steps. You could have even done all this and just written down 6. It's okay. So now we have A is 1, B is 6, as well as C. And again, you're not going to have to guess. It's not going to be like, can I factor this? Should I use the quadratic formula? It's going to tell you. Solve by factoring, which was chapter 4. Tomorrow's quiz, it'll say solve by quadratic formula. Even on the exam, solve by factoring, solve using quadratic formula. It will tell you in grade 10, okay? So you don't have to try to do the chart and figure out the two factors. Is this factorable? Don't worry about it. If it says quadratic formula, use the quadratic formula. Now, you can technically use the quadratic formula for any quadratic equation. However, especially so in science, we don't really care what you do, but in math, you have to be able to do both. So if you solve an equation and it says solve by factoring and you use the quadratic formula, you won't get marks for that. Okay? You have to do what it says. Factoring, show the factoring steps, quadratic formula, do the quadratic formula steps. Oh. I'm kind of running out of room. Is it okay if I don't write the general formula, the quadratic formula? It's on your sheet. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you. Oh, see, I should write it down. So it's negative b. So because it's positive b, then it becomes negative. And you always are given this.